Today is the day that we celebrate All Saints' Day, a day to remember those whom we have lost in the last year, a day to remember all those who have passed on. The church gets dressed up in white, we light candles, and tell stories of incredible people who have meant the world to us. Growing up at my church, I think All Saints' Day was even a cake Sunday, one of those few special Sundays a year, along with Confirmation and Easter and Mother's Day, when there was always cake during the fellowship hour, and each piece had one of the little flower frostings on it. It was the best. All in all, this day is one of the great festivals of the church year, Cake Sunday or not. But I have to admit that this Sunday usually bums me out, as those of you who have read my newsletter article may remember. I might even say that more than any other day of the church year, All Saints' Day has unmatched powers in bringing me down. At my church growing up, much like we do here, we would light candles during the service in remembrance of those who had died. And every year, I would light the same 2 candles for the same 2 people, my Grandpa Phil and my family friend and youth pastor, Tom, the 2 men that were in the pictures that I showed to the kids. As I think about All Saints' Day and have been getting ready to preach on it, I've been thinking a lot about a poem by W.S. Merwin called Separation. It's the poem that's on the front of your bulletin, and it was in the newsletter as well. For the last few weeks, this poem has been rattling around in my brain. It seems, in some ways, to capture a lot of what All Saints' Day is about. It reads, "Your absence has gone through me, like thread through a needle. Everything I do is stitched with its color." This is a day of telling stories, of remembering absences, and of witnessing to the ways that God works through ordinary people to bless each of us and to stitch color into our lives in special ways. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the 2 people who have meant a great deal to me and the effect they've had on my life, and also about the way that God uses each of us to be blessings to the world. So the first person I want to tell you about is my Grandpa Phil. He died when I was 7, so I don't have a lot of personal memories of him, but everyone seems to tell the same stories. He was a man that was very devoted to his community. My grandma would always sort of joke, but exasperated, that she could never plant a garden because every time she went to go harvest the vegetables, my grandpa had already given them away. "Phil, where's the lettuce and the cucumbers?" "Oh, well, you know, I gave them to the linswoops and the shoals and the bergstrums," and everyone else in town was enjoying my grandmother's vegetables, except for her. But this love of his community of Grand Marais, Minnesota, has stuck with me in some ways, and a large part of my heart feels at home there. He was also a man that loved his family and was very committed to his faith. He was the youngest of 12 brothers, and my mom was the youngest of 31 cousins. And each of those people, and I don't even know how many people are in my generation. We've never counted, because I don't think we could. Each of those people in this huge clan still were important to him as individuals. My mom tells the story when I was 6 days old, they had to take me to the hospital because they thought I had meningitis. And so she called up her parents, who's my grandpa, and she said, "Dad, Mom, you know, take your baby Steph into the hospital. She won't stop screaming, blah, blah, blah. But we'll let you know when we know more," thinking that they would say a quick prayer and move on with their lives. So after a day in the hospital and me getting a spinal tap and all sorts of things that my mom still has flashbacks of when she hears screaming babies of the pediatrician, she called up my grandpa and was like, "Oh, Steph's fine after a day." We brought her home, and my grandpa just burst into tears and couldn't say a word, and finally put my grandma on the phone. She said, "Well, he's been sitting in his chair for the last 24 hours with his hand on the receiver, just praying for Stephanie." And he was weeping because he was so happy to hear that I was doing well. I was 6 days old. He was 5 hours away, but that to me is a story that shows me how much he was devoted to his family and to his faith. The last thing that I want to tell you about my grandpa is that he had a great sense of humor. He went bald at the age of 13 from some fever or something, but every time you would ask him about it, which I did a lot when I was little, "Grandpa, why don't you have any hairs on your head? Why are you so bald?" He he would say the same thing. Well, Stephanie, God made very few perfect heads in this world. The rest he put hair on. He kind of stroked his little dome. He was great, and a lot of those things have stuck with me. The other person I want to share a few stories about is my pastor, Tom. Our families grew up together. He had kids about my same age, and he and my dad were the closest of friends. He, too, was very committed to his family. His brother-in-law and sister owned a camp, and they would always have, like, football games and stuff during Christmas. I remember being so jealous. And he was a man of incredible faith. He was my pastor, and he was the one you would go to with real questions as a little kid, like, what does it feel like the minute after you die? And if Adam and Eve only had 2 sons, where did the rest of humanity come from? And things like that. And he always would reply so patiently and so excessively. A lot of the things that he taught me later on in elementary school and junior high before he died about relationships and faith are things I still use with youth today. I mean, whether it's the sex retreat that we're planning in January, I'm like, oh, I remember what Tom said. Great, I'll use that. What else do you say to kids? But he could just articulate his faith so well in ways that still stay with me. And anyone that has ever met him remembers his laugh. For better or worse, his brother has the exact same laugh. And after Tom died when I was in 8th grade, it was almost painful to hear David crack up because it just pierced you so deep. But now, it's like such a blessing that you could hear that echo from Tom. Tom was one that never took things too seriously unless they needed to be taken seriously. So once we were in the van, their van, this maroon boxy thing with the wood paneling, this was like mid-90s and it was already pretty old. So I think you have like a visual of what I'm talking about. And I see the check engine light is on. So if you know me or can imagine me as a little kid, I was trying to be helpful. Tom, the check engine light is on. You should like get that looked at. I was like, Seth. He, again, patiently looks at me. That light has been on for almost 10 years. And he slams his fist down on the dashboard and it goes out. And I was like, but? He's like, it's fine. The best part is that his son still does this. They got a new van. The check engine light was on for a while, and my friend Ian was like, Isaac, Tom's son, Isaac, that check engine light's on. He's like, don't worry about it. It goes out. They do this in all their cars now. Oh. So why do I tell you about these 2 men? I'm sure each of you have plenty of stories you could get up here and tell. I happen to have the privilege of being able to speak to you during the sermon, but I mention these 2 today because both have had an incredible effect on me in their life and in their death. Both were men deeply committed to their faith and family, a commitment that resonates to this day in their loved ones who have come to share the same values. Like the poem suggests, I know that everything I do is stitched with the colors of these men, whether it's teaching youth about relationships or singing to preschool kids. One of the things about remembering the past is that it can help us to set a course for the future. I know that both of these men have not only shaped the person that I have become, but the person that I aim to be. Now, do I tell you about them because they were perfect saints and I want each of you to be exactly like them? Not at all. Do you all remember people today and light candles for them because they were flawless? No. Maybe it's just me, but I have an amazing capacity to romanticize the past. I am a pro at euphoric recall. And I think that this church holiday lends itself to that task particularly well. We are tempted to remember these people as perfect examples of the faith. But the truth is that my Grandpa Phil and Tom weren't perfect by any means. They weren't exactly saints, as you might typically think of it. They lost their tempers, had bad habits, made plenty of mistakes. In short, they were human, and they were sinners. But the good news today, and the good news every day, is that we are all saints, and we are all sinners. The good news is that God uses these sinner saints to bless us, and uses us as sinner saints to bless others. This day is not about how a few achieved perfection, or the select holy ones who are the blessed of God. Rather, it is about the ways that God's mercy showed through their imperfect lives. And in this light, Today we can not only celebrate those whom we have lost, but we can celebrate all of those sinner saints in our lives that God uses to show us love and mercy every day. That, to me, is truly what All Saints' Day is about. It's not about piling up perfect people who could do no wrong. It's not about the few exceptions among us who live 100% in faith. It's a time to celebrate when ordinary sinners conveyed God's holy love to us and to the world. This year, this Sunday is less gloomy for me. I no longer only feel the piercing pain of the thread going all the way through the needle. Instead, I get to see the colors that have come into my life because of these sinner saints and all the sinner saints that I have met. Today we celebrate that our lives are transformed by God working in and through us, and by sinners and saints both of the past and those we meet